അവിടുന്ന് വൈകുന്നേരം പണത്തിൽ എന്നെ അവിടെ മനസ്സിലേക്ക് മനസ്സിലാക്കി.
Hey everyone, it's Sam, and welcome back to the 911 Nonsense podcast. To stay in the loop, learn about upcoming guests, and join in the conversations with the Noon community, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And hey, if you like what you hear in this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support means the world to us. On this episode of Noon, I'm thrilled to introduce you to Tami, an incredible emergency nurse who truly lives life to the fullest. Despite facing numerous struggles, Tami overcame them with therapy and determination, emerging stronger than ever. Her journey is a powerful testament to resilience and the importance of mental health. Tami's story is not only inspiring, but also a great example of the positive impact we can have in our community. Join us for an uplifting conversation with Tami, where she shares her experiences, insights, and the lessons learned along the way. Let's get started. Awesome. Tami, thank you so much for joining us on the Noon podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm so excited to have you on today. Can I go ahead and get an introduction?
Yeah, my name is Tami Hamill, and I've been a registered nurse for 14 years. A large majority of that has been spent in the emergency department. I have done some float pool. I did home health for a very short stint, and I did psych at the very beginning of my nursing career, but large majority of that has been in emergency medicine. I tell people all the time that emergency medicine is almost like a bad relationship. You know, maybe it's not the greatest thing for your mental health and for you, but it's something that's really difficult to step away from because it's really easy to love and it's easy to really enjoy your job doing it.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic way of putting it. And it's something that I've come to realize in doing more and more of these episodes that you said it's like a bad relationship, and it really is very similar to a bad relationship because it's you get paid really well, you know, and you're afraid to step off because you're not sure if you're going to do well in any other area, right? The emergency just kind of sucks you in and then keeps you in.
It absolutely does. And we are the jack of all trades and the master of none. So then the thought process of going somewhere else and having to hone in on like one particular skill is a really scary thing because, you know, as well as I do, having been in emergency medicine yourself, whether it through EMS or flight or even in hospital, that we jump from one thing to another. We may deliver a baby in one room and then hop over and take care of a STEMI in another room and then turn around and take care of a trauma and then turn around and sew up a simple laceration, and you have all that going on all at once. So I think in our brains, and me and you have had talks about this, about like ADHD and stuff, is in our brains having to slow down and just focus on one of those particular things is really difficult for our brains to wrap around.
Yeah, and I'm a hyper focused kind of person. So if I am starting to focus on something, like I am focused on that and I don't want anything else, I'll get really crabby.
Yeah, same, same. I'm like, I can only deal with this one chaotic event right now. And then you have a multitude of chaotic events. And it's really funny watching in emergency medicine, you'll have all of these things going on. And a large majority of people who do work in emergency medicine, it's funny because you'll have just chaos going on all over the place. And then you ask them a specific question, they may be in the middle of doing one thing in a completely different area, but you ask them a question about something going on over here and they can just rattle off everything that's going on in that room like it's nothing, and it just popped out of their brain, and then go back to doing exactly what they were doing before, or not even stop doing that thing. They're like, oh yeah, this is what's going on, and then you turn around and just keep going and you just roll with it.
Yeah, it's a true story. What a great description. Have you always wanted to be a nurse?
So no, it's really funny. I was younger. I think that there was always something in me, that there was a curiosity for nursing, but I did never think it would be something that I was good at. I could like basically gaslighted myself into believing that it's not something I would like. You know, I don't want to deal with blood and guts and all this other stuff, and I would be grossed out and all of this. And I was working in a job. I was actually working for, I'm going to go way back with this one, Singular Wireless, which is now AT&T. Yeah.
Yeah.
In their call center. And I had two small kids. And I was not getting paid very well by any means. Definitely not enough to like sustain having a family and stuff like that and being able to pay bills and enjoy life. And I had gone back to college and initially I had been in college previous to having my oldest son, and I actually was going to work to do law enforcement initially. And with my first pregnancy, I was really, really sick. I ended up having to drop out of college. And then I got pregnant with my second, life started happening. Ended up working at Singular Wireless, wasn't making enough money, decided I wanted more for my life, and just kind of started taking classes just to kind of see what I was feeling. I was like, had tried to go the law enforcement route, and while that kind of stuff always piques my interest, it just wasn't really where my heart was. And I didn't see myself doing it long term. So I started taking classes and I ended up in anatomy and physiology. And anatomy and physiology just absolutely lit a fire under me. The way the human body works, the way everything works together. I was like, this is what is interesting to me. What can I do with this? And so I toyed with that idea of nursing and ultrasound and kind of got to collectively look back and look at jobs that were available, look at pay scales, look at that kind of thing, and decided nursing was the best path. And then I tumbled into emergency nursing. I actually went to nursing school thinking I wanted to do labor and delivery, and then did my labor and delivery rotations and was like, absolutely not. I'm not doing this. There is no way I want to do this every day. And I did an ER rotation and just absolutely fell in love with it and said, this is what I want to be doing. This is what I enjoy. This is how my brain works, and I've been here ever since, in some capacity, doing emergency nursing. Even when I did float pool, I still did ICU and did emergency room nursing. And so I stepped away for a few years, just to do float pool. I needed to get my brain cleared out from some stuff that had happened, and then came back to the ER and have just been rocking it ever since.
That's amazing. And so you and I met actually while you were traveling, which was really cool because I feel like you were one of the few nurses that actually cared about their job and not just I'm traveling, I don't have to do anything kind of position. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it was really nice to have that experience. You actually came with a couple of other travel nurses that just were absolutely amazing in that small time frame. Marie Cuddyback, Jennifer
yeah,
Caribou, like all of those people that came in right around the same time that you did. And it was just a really cool experience getting to experience that in a trauma center with people I didn't know. So thank you for getting into that. You said that you were interested in law enforcement. I'm going to start there. Was it police work that you were looking at to into, or was it like the forensic side that you were kind of
the
looking into?
forensic side is
Okay.
more. Yeah, that's my jam.
Kind of
So
knowing you, I kind of figured it was a forensic side,
yeah,
not an actual police officer. So that's
not an
really
actual
funny.
like the actual. I had no interest in being out and being a beat cop, which obviously, no offense to people that do that. My interest was I wanted to do like forensics and detective work and that kind of thing, and figure out the whys and the kind of who done it.
Yeah.
That's what interests me. I didn't want to be out writing tickets and you know that kind of thing. I wanted to be the person behind the desk going through the files and figuring out what is going on,
Yeah, putting
who
the
did
puzzle
this or who
pieces
did that.
together.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep.
Yeah. Oh, every once in a while I still toy around with that. I forget how old I am sometimes, I think, and even my wife is like, you need to fucking figure it out, right? Like you need to stop. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, okay? Leave me alone. I just want
I'm
to
not
do
a
it.
grown up. I'm not a grown up yet.
Exactly.
I can
Yeah.
still change my mind as to what I'm doing.
Exactly. Yeah, I have time. I have plenty of time. I can do what I want.
Well, what's funny about that is now, so obviously I ended up in nursing and obviously I ended up in the ER, but I'm actually going through and doing my training for my SART nursing, SANE nursing for some people, which is your sexual assault response team, and training in forensics and stuff like that for that and domestic violence and child abuse right now. We're actually trying to start a program right now in the area that I'm in. We have one, but we're trying to build on that and get better training. So we are going to be traveling next month. I'm hardly home at all because I'm going to a couple of different trainings for that. And so it's funny because it almost is like it came full circle, because I started out being interested in the forensics and that side of police work and law enforcement and stuff. And now I get to full circle it and come back to that and do the sexual assault stuff and the domestic violence stuff, and do help to give bridge that gap with law enforcement and the forensic side of that, with what you do in that and evidence collection, and while also getting to be a nurse and have that compassionate side to it to people in some of their most difficult times. So I'm very, very excited to be doing that.
Yeah, no, that's fucking cool and really sad at the same time. Like
Yeah,
that's a tough position to be in.
it absolutely is. And it's sad that it's a necessity in this world, but it is a necessity. And you need people in those positions that are there because it's something that they're passionate about and they understand the importance of why that needs to happen and why it needs to happen in a correct manner, and that are willing to do the training and willing to dive into that world, because it's not a pretty world by any means.
No.
It's very deep, it's very dark, and it's very sad.
And that's like the best part, right? Like, or the first step is having that person who has that passion to do it, right? Like,
Yes.
I'm never going to have a passion to do L&D,
Yeah.
but I'm glad that there are people out there that do.
Yes, I'm certainly glad that people enjoy delivering babies. It is not my jam by any means. I make jokes with people all the time and I tell them, I'm like, I said ER nurses and people that work in EMS, you can literally get your arm cut off and hand it to us and we're, oh, let's fix this. I said, but if you come in talking about the baby is coming, you will see all of us go into just full panic mode.
Yeah, we're pushing you to the elevator as fast as
Yeah,
we can.
we're screaming down the hall on the stretcher. Just don't push. Keep your legs closed. Everything's gonna be okay.
So what turned you off from that? Because you said you wanted to be L&D. What turned you off from wanting to do L&D?
I think honestly, and it wasn't necessarily the L&D rotation. I did a NICU rotation, and it was really heartbreaking. And I think that that really made me realize, everybody thinks L&D must be so great and wonderful. You get to deliver babies all day, but there is also a very, very sad side to L&D. Not everything is a good outcome in L&D, and you see some of that. While most deliveries are good, people go home with a very healthy baby, there's a lot of families that unfortunately don't get to do that. And that is heartbreaking in and of itself. And then also, you have the other side of that, to where there's people that, in all honesty, probably shouldn't be having babies. And their babies are born unhealthy and because of choices that they've made. And when I did my NICU rotation, I just decided that that was not something I could deal with. Like on a mental and an emotional level, seeing both sides of that was probably not something that I could deal with.
Yeah, that's hard. That is very hard. Do you mind if I ask what area? Like, I'm gonna guess it wasn't New Mexico that you did your NICU rotation. So what area were you
In West Texas, in Midland, Odessa.
in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we have a lot of like out here, we have a lot of baby overdoses and babies coming out addicted to substances that it's hard, right? And we just have so many and we don't have enough people to take care of those kids.
You absolutely don't. And I mean, my hat's off to the NICU nurses that do that. And I know some NICU nurses, and they are truly angels in disguise. I mean, I I cannot imagine the difficulty of the stuff that you take home in that job. But on the other side of that too, they have some really good victories. And I also look at that and I hear them talk about, the babies that they send home with mom and dad that nobody thought had a fighting chance, kind of thing, and then they end up getting to take them home. And there's that beautiful side to that. But man, NICU nurses, I just I'm glad that they exist for sure.
Yeah, props to you, NICU nurses. One of my favorite ones, Michelle Harris. You can tell they were passionate about their jobs, and that's amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
So you have settled, and you're not doing travel nursing anymore.
Nope.
And this is one of like this is going to be totally random. I'm sorry, but this is one of my favorite things about your profile is that you post some of the funniest, craziest like animal pictures.
I have ended up in some situations through life that have been really funny and that all I can do is just kind of sit back and laugh, honestly. Um, Moved to California, came out to Northern California, and I am a West Texas girl. I grew up in Texas my entire life until I was 37 and decided to start traveling. Started traveling as a means I needed to get out of my hometown and I needed to see other worlds, which is something I will tell everybody. I'm like, get out of your hometown and get a different perspective because it will change your view of the world. Because we end up in our bubbles, in our mindsets, in the areas that we live in, and that's the only culture that we ever know. And then we just kind of end up closed minded like that. But like when you jump out of that area and out of that comfort zone and start getting other places, it's phenomenal. You know, it's changed my perspective on life. But being from West Texas, which is very flat and desert, and there's no mountains, there's no nothing, found myself living in the literal mountains of California, dealing with bears. I lived in the forest for a while in a, I say log cabin, I mean, it was a house, but it was made of logs in the middle of the woods, and had a whole situation with a bear that I'm pretty sure was just sent from the universe to harass me because that bear, he loved my trash cans. He really liked to try to get in my house. He'd watch me through the windows. Just all kinds of insanity went on with
What
that
a
bear.
fucking creeper.
He was my stalker. He really loved me a lot. That's all it was with him. But just some of the situations, like I, oh my gosh, and it was so funny. You know, I we didn't have snow where I'm from, really. Like we'd get 3 inches of snow on the ground in Texas, and everything shuts down.
Yeah.
And then I moved out there, and there was snow, like so much snow. And I remember standing out in my driveway trying to plow it one day and just sitting down and looking around and wondering, how did I get here? What has happened? But it was a really good experience, and it's not something that I would trade for anything. It definitely made me a stronger person because you learn what you can persevere when you're stuck in those situations. And what else are you going to do but roll with it?
Right. And you can't just call off to work and say, hey, I'm snowed in, right? The expectation is you go to work even if there's 12 feet of snow on the ground.
Yep, that's, yeah, you better get here because we need you.
That's so funny. Do you deal with a lot of other different types of wildlife out there?
Yeah, I live back in the city now, so I don't deal with a lot. I have possums that get in my backyard, which is really funny. I have to make sure I close my doggy door at night so that I don't suddenly wake up with like a possum in my room or something, because that would be terrible. My dog would lose her mind. We do have a lot. We have bears all over the place here. I've had to learn bear safety and what to do if a bear approaches you. You know, I spend a lot of time out at the lakes here, and a lot of times getting lost on the lakes and ending up in situations in the woods that I kind of have to know what I'm going to do if something happens. I had one last weekend. I went out paddleboarding by myself after work to an area I wasn't sure about, and I kept hearing this noise, and I thought it was a bird. And so I'm just out there floating and just watching the birds. It's like close to dark, you know. And I'm floating towards this noise, thinking it's a bird the whole time, and then kind of stopped and got to thinking, I'm like, that bird hasn't moved at all. Like birds fly. Like they don't just sit in a tree and make the same noise repetitively, you know. And I sat there for a minute and I'm like, oh, I think that that's a mountain lion.
Oh
And so I'm like,
gosh.
well, I'm in the water, so I'm safe. But then I decided to Google if mountain lions can swim. And then it said that mountain lions not only can swim, they're very avid swimmers and they can swim for very long distances. And so I grabbed my paddle and I'm trying to paddle away from it because now I'm thinking, well, this mountain lion's probably sitting somewhere I can't see him. And he's like, well, I don't even have to get in the water. She's just coming straight towards me. And
Yeah.
it's like DoorDash for the mountain lion.
Do you carry any type of weapons or mace with you when you go out?
Not that day. I did not.
What is wrong with you?
I don't know. Just living life on the edge out here, I guess, with all these crazy animals that may be trying to kill me or something. I don't know.
You're crazy. Have you heard the way that mountain lions scream?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It is the most terrifying noise you will ever hear in your life. What's weird is they will imitate people. Like they have one scream where it literally sounds like a woman in distress
Yeah.
that would honestly make somebody like stop and be like, oh God, it sounds like somebody's in trouble. Maybe somebody fell down something and they're trying to get somebody's attention. And the entire time it's a mountain lion.
Yeah, it's creepy watching them on like TikTok or YouTube or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
nope.
They're definitely, they're creepers and they're quiet and stealthy. So
Yeah.
definitely something I'm watching out for now.
Yeah, they had that. They had, I don't know if you saw, it was a video of a guy that was getting stalked by a mountain lion, and this sucker just would not leave him alone. He kept turning around, like, obviously, you don't want to shoot an animal unless you absolutely have to. And he
Right.
was almost getting to that point because this mountain lion would not leave him alone.
Yeah, and the thing with mountain lions too is once you notice them, they've probably been stalking you for a very long time.
Yes.
And they've been watching your movements and they know that you don't know that they're there and they've been watching you. I think I read somewhere that if you're out on a hike and you suddenly see a mountain lion, that he probably has been following you for at least a mile.
Yeah, like you're already in trouble at this point.
Yeah, and you didn't even know it. You just were out there enjoying nature, and this mountain lion's planning its next meal with you.
Yes. So, one of my favorite things about yours and I's relationship is that you are like a true crime junkie. And I love that
Absolutely.
because I am also a crime junkie. So, we talk a lot about cases that we find here and there. Have you looked into like web sleuthing at all or anything like that?
I, not on like any kind of a outside of it being a casual thing, but I will definitely rabbit hole on some cases and start digging and diving. Um, I will end up like stalking people's Facebook profiles and like TikTok accounts and Instagrams and all kinds of stuff, trying to figure stuff out and put pieces together. Once I find a case and I'm like, oh, that's his ex-girlfriend, but the ex-girlfriend's ex-husband is this person, and then he has this mom. And then I'll end up, I really have to watch myself sometimes because I will spend like a whole day. You know that meme that's got that guy that he is up against the wall and he's got the red string all over the place? Like I will end up on that and then I will talk somebody's ear off about the theories that I've come up with about these cases. And so I really have to like watch myself with that. I did that the other day talking about, we have a very famous case where I'm at in Reading. It was actually in a town down south from us called Red Bluff, and it's the girl in the box. And she was, I think, back in the late 70s, maybe early 80s. She was a hitchhiker that got picked up by this couple and then was held captive in a box under their bed for 7 years.
Wow.
And so I really went on a deep dive with that one, not from the suspect because he's in prison. He's actually trying to get out on parole now, and the state is actually building a case. And I need to look into that to see if they ever resolve that. The state's actually trying to make it to where he can't get out on parole. They're saying that he is a lifetime offender and that he's unsafe, which, I mean, hello, he kept somebody in a box for 7 years. But there's also, they think that he's also involved with the missing and potential murder of another woman. And I think that it's his wife because it was him and his wife, but she kind of had some like Stockholm syndrome and like psychiatric stuff going on with all of this and was kind of coerced into participating in all this with him. But she maintains that there was a girl before the woman that they did keep captive that was almost like she was supposed to be the original one that they were going to keep captive, but they actually accidentally overdosed her,
Oh.
and that they buried her somewhere out here. And I mean, nobody's ever heard from the woman before, and I mean, there's good evidence that that probably is what happened to her, but they can't try him on it because they can't find an actual body of hers. So,
That is
but that one,
insane.
I deep dive on that one.
I'm gonna have to look into that.
I'll send you links. I've got them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to look into that one. That's nuts. Did the girl in the box, if I remember correctly, she ended up living, is that correct?
Yep, she
Yes,
absolutely did.
okay.
She
Yeah.
absolutely did. She speaks out very strongly about her case. She has been a huge advocate for obviously him not getting out of prison. She has been very open with her story and telling it, and it's very harrowing. And it's very impressive that she is allows people to see that side of her trauma because it was traumatizing for her. There's nothing that's not traumatizing about what happened to her, but she is very vocal about it, and she's interviewed a couple of times. For a couple of years, she really, I think she reclused and did not want to do interviews, which is understandable. She needed to process what she
Yeah.
had been through. But in recent years, especially with him coming up on parole and stuff, she has spoken out very adamantly about his behavior, who he is as a person, telling the courts, if you let him out, he will do this again. Like, this is not just a one and done thing for him. And he by no means has learned his lesson from being in prison. This is a psychiatric problem with him. And he's going to cause more problems. And next time, the next girl may not be so lucky.
No, it's totally true, right? There's a fine line between whether or not we should let some of these people out who've done these heinous crimes. And for those of you that are listening, like if you are a crime junkie and you have a favorite case, head over to the Facebook page and let me know what your favorite cases are so we can talk about it.
Yes, we will. I will hop on that thread very quickly and discuss anything and everything with people because,
Heck yes,
and
dude.
if you give me new links too, I will be thrilled because I'm always looking for a new one that's not, on everybody's radar. And I really like those ones that are kind of buried underground and nobody has really heard about, the ones that are not super famous and people are hearing about them all the time, because those are the ones that you're really start digging on and you're like, what happened in this case that nobody can figure this out?
I'm going to take this a little further. There's another TikTok of a guy who, and I can't remember where he was located. I wish I would have looked it up before we started talking, but he is walking out in the middle of the desert and he starts finding these women's shoes. He keeps finding
We were
women's
just
high
talking
heels.
about this at a party that I was at the other day. Yes.
What do you think of that? Like he finds like 20 pairs of women's shoes, very specifically. Is this coincidence?
They were all
or is
high
this...
heels too. And the weird part about that is that when he went to the police told him that it was probably like a dumping ground, like maybe for trash or something. And he's like, I'm literally in the middle of nowhere. And
Yeah.
he said, nobody is walking miles into the middle of nothing to dump just bags of high heels. So
Yes.
that's the part that really got me, is that the police just blew him off and didn't think anything odd was about it. And they're like, oh, it's probably just trash. What? Just high heels, nothing else, just high heels.
Yeah, and this was out
that
in
one.
I'm pretty sure it was Colorado. Yeah, that one will be interesting to follow along because we're going to end up seeing like in 2 or 3 years that they end up having a mass killer or something.
Well, you know what that one reminded me of is the one in Albuquerque, the oh gosh,
The
what was
West
the name of
Mesa
it?
killer.
Yes,
Yep.
the West Mesa killer, where the lady was walking her dog and her dog found a human bone piece, and they ended up digging that entire area of the West Mesa up and uncovering hordes of bodies and not knowing what was going on. And
Yeah.
that's what that case is going to end up being, because I bet, when we were talking about it, I said, probably if this is somebody that's, out murdering people and he's collecting women's shoes as trophies and then dumping out there, that's probably A, where he's keeping his trophies, and B, probably is getting women that society wouldn't necessarily miss. And so it's probably not your typical, if you went missing or if I went missing, alarm bells would go up. Our friends, our families, our spouses, our children, whoever would be like, God, where is she? This is not like her. These are probably women that, the law enforcement and society are just like, well, that's just who they were as a person. And they probably just moved on, kind of a thing. So that's what I think that's going to end up happening with that.
I agree. There's a really good chance. You and I have talked about starting a true crime podcast. I think that would be amazing.
We should absolutely do it. We could talk for hours about that.
It would be amazing. I'm going to talk about something a little controversial here. Speaking of bears and true crime, have you seen? Kind of random, I know, but have you seen that like trend that was going around for a little bit that asked people, women specifically, if they'd rather go into the forest with a bear than with a man?
Which one they'd rather run into in the woods,
Yes.
a bear or a strange man? Yes, yes. And I've also seen the other side of that, where people don't understand why women are saying the bear. And I'm thinking, I personally have run into both situations, being somebody that goes and gets lost in the woods. I have run into a bear and a strange man that popped out of a bush. And I can tell you that I was a lot more comforted by the bear than I was the man that just popped out of a bush suddenly. I was really concerned with what that man was going to do, and I just hightailed it out there. The bear just kind of watched me, and then he walked off. But yeah, I have seen that trended. We've a lot of my friends have had that discussion, and it's been an interesting one. And I think most women are saying that they choose the bear on that one.
It's an unfortunate, like, it actually, I think for me personally it was very eye-opening to see that. And I think, in my personal opinion, there have been a lot of men who have done a lot of really shitty things, right? But there are a lot of men who are out there that have gone above and beyond what they should have done for not just females, but for other people. And I think we're just shitting on those people.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I agree with that. I mean, that's the same thing as like, men saying all women are crazy. Well, we know as women that not all of us are crazy. I'm not crazy by any means, at least not in that fashion. I make some I mean, I get lost in the woods and run into wildlife, but I'm not like crazy like that. So I do think that it is crummy that the perspective of that is that it's all men, and that's not like, not shitting on all men by any means, but I also think that there is a recognition from a lot of men that they understand why that's the sentiment, and that they can also recognize that it is scary because there are some really scary people out there in the world. And I've had that discussion with a lot of my guy friends, as to, what it's like being a female in the world and having to navigate that and not knowing what people's intentions are. And I'm a small female. And so, I'm almost pocket sized sometimes. So you can just like, it'd be easy just to pick me up and carry me off. So a lot of guys, I think, do understand that perspective. But I also think most men, for the majority of it, are also protectors. And I think that if they saw something like that, they would absolutely jump into action. And I've had men do that for me that I don't even know, being out and about or something, and seeing a guy harass me, or me being uncomfortable, and them stepping in and doing that. I actually had a situation in Albuquerque. I was walking out of, can't remember the name of that pizza shop. It's downtown, but I'd gone to pick up a pizza for the house one day, broad daylight. And I was walking out of this pizza shop. I had my pizzas in my hand, walking back to my car. And this man came running across the street at me, yelling at me. And this other guy that was walking on the same side of the sidewalk as me ran up and got between me and him. And the guy was like, "You need to get away from her." And he was like, "Oh no, I was just going to ask her if I could get $1 from her." And that dude, like, I mean, he chested out, did all that, was like,
Yeah.
"Get the hell away from her." And he said he walked me to my car to make sure I safely got in my car. So I think there's far more men like that than there are dangerous men in the world, for sure.
I agree. I think there are a lot of really good guys out there. And shocker that that happened in Albuquerque, right? I couldn't even tell you. We pulled up to get gas at a gas station one day, and there was a gentleman screaming on the corner of the where you pull into the gas station and the street. So naturally, I'm keeping my eyes on him, right? And he came running up to me telling me, "Give me money, give me money." He ended up punching me in the face.
Oh,
And yeah, I told my wife, like, stay in the car, don't get out. He punched me in the face. A bunch of people witnessed, a bunch of people heard it. The car that was parked next to me had this huge dude in a kilt, and he ran over, and we ended up getting this guy on the ground. And you know what happened to this guy that punched me in the face?
nothing.
Absolutely nothing. I never got called for a hearing. I never got called, and this was I don't know, 3 years or so ago. It witnessed, had it on video, like nothing happened to this guy. It was absolutely insane.
I tell people all the time, and I loved Albuquerque. It was so pretty there, and I absolutely loved the people that I met and stuff. But sometimes when I'm describing Albuquerque, it almost seems like it's not a real place because of the just some of the things that I saw while I was living there that just blew my mind. I remember one day, the area we lived in, we had a 7-Eleven, and every morning I would stop by this 7-Eleven to get a Sprite before I went home and went to bed after night shift. And I drove up one day, and I knew the cashier, I go in there every day after my shift. And I pull up, and she has all the mats outside. She has a water hose. She is inside of the store. And I pull up and I get out, and she's like, "Hey, I'm closed." And I was like, "Are you okay?" And she goes, "No, actually." She's like, "You're a nurse. You can help me. How do you get blood out of stuff?" And I just kind of sat there and I was like, "What?" She's like, "Look, come here." And so I go in there, and there's just blood everywhere, all over the counter, the cigarettes that are behind the counter, all that. And I was like, "What happened?" And she said some guy came in and was checking out, like buying cigarettes, was up at the cash register. This other car pulls up. This dude jumps out of the car, runs to the back of the store, grabs a 40, runs to the front of the store, smashes the dude that was already at the cash register in the back of the head. That guy, obviously, she was like, his head just exploded everywhere. And then that guy ran out of the store, jumped in the car, and then they drove off. And I'm just standing there looking at her, thinking, I don't know how this is a real life situation that's going on right
Yeah.
now. And she's like, but they want me to clean up this blood. And I was like, I don't feel like that should be part of your job as a 7-Eleven employee. I'm pretty sure you don't get paid enough for this. But I just told her hydrogen peroxide gets it all out. So
You said 7-Eleven and I wasn't even surprised. That's so
yeah,
sad, dude.
yeah, at all, especially in that neighborhood.
That is pretty crazy. Is that probably one of the craziest things that you've ever seen?
Outside of a hospital setting, for sure. Yeah, that was definitely. And I said, was the guy alive? And she goes, I have no idea. The ambulance took him to the hospital. She's like, I don't know. She goes, I didn't check. I freaked out. She was like, and she said, I was trying to see the name of the like the kind of car that he drove off in. She's like, and called the police and called 911, and they came and picked him up and took him. She's like, he was definitely unconscious. I can tell you that. So I just, yeah, that was definitely one of the wildest scenes I rolled up on.
That is insane.
I tell people that there's a reason why Breaking Bad was filmed in Albuquerque. I'm like, it's fitting,
Based in Albuquerque, you mean?
based on a true story.
Yeah, no, it is a true story. Oh, that's so unfortunate, but it is. uh, but you said that that's one of the craziest things that you've ever seen outside of the hospital. What's one of maybe the crazier things that you've seen in the hospital?
Oh gosh, oh man, years and years of that, and I just, the craziest thing I've seen inside of the hospital. Trying to think. I live in such a like comparatively speaking to where I'm from in West Texas and then being in Albuquerque, where I live now, like our violent crime is not high here. We barely see gunshot wounds and stuff like that. I think the craziest thing probably that I've ever been a part of, to be honest, and this is a wild story, and I'm assuming I'm sure it's fine for me to talk about years later. We got a call to the ER one night, just a heads up from EMS letting us know that they were out on a car accident and just kind of giving us a heads up, being like, hey, this will definitely be a trauma. Um, just wanted to give you a heads up so y'all can clear a room, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, that's just typical, night in the ER, night shift in the ER. So I go clear a room, get it ready for this trauma. Time goes by, don't really hear from EMS. They radio back and they're like, hey, we're just letting you know that we're out here still, that this is a pretty lengthy extrication. We're still trying to get this guy out of the car. Okay, and I'm just thinking they'll come when they come. And the next call I get over the radio is them radioing back to tell us that they need more supplies. They need a nurse out in the field and possibly a doctor. And I radioed back because I'm in charge of the ER. I radioed back and said, I need one of y'all to call me on the actual phone and not the radio. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. So one of the guys calls me. They've been out on the scene now trying to extricate this person from this vehicle that had run into a telephone pole for 2.5 hours now and could not get this person out of the vehicle. The car was just smashed to crap. There was shards into the person that was like entrapping them. And so they said, we are out of supplies completely. We have 3 ambulances out here. We've been pouring saline, doing all these things trying to get this person untrapped. So I hang up the phone. I'm like, give me a few minutes. I'll call y'all back. Let me figure out what to do. And I had my house supervisor there. My house supervisor, I just looked at him and I'd had them on speaker. And I said, I don't really know what to do. I said, who am I going to send out there with supplies? And he said, oh, you're going to go. And I said, why am I going? He said, well, you have the most experience out of anybody here right now. And he said, and that's just, if I'm sending anybody out, it's going to be you. So we call them back. We get kind of a list of what they think that they need out in the field to assist them. And they had a cop come up to the ER to pick me up, to take me back out to the scene. I had to call my surgeon to go out there with us on scene as well to try to figure this out and figure out what we were going to do. And I'll tell you what, I had done ride-alongs with EMS before, but they were pretty mild, going to people's houses, picking up sick people, bringing them to the hospital, that kind of thing. When I did my previous ride-along, I hadn't had any like major wrecks or anything like that. there was nothing that could have prepared me for what we rolled up on. It's the middle of the night. They have fire trucks and ambulances and cops out there. Um, there are firemen everywhere trying to get this guy free. EMS is out there trying to figure out what to do. And I walk up and we start unloading the police car with all these supplies that we've brought. And it was hot and it was so loud and it was so bright because they have spotlights everywhere, and I just remember walking up and I said, "What do we need to do?" And they said, "We need somebody small that we can kind of get down in there that can look because we can't see what's going on to be able to figure out what's going on if we can even resolve this problem right now. What are we going to do?" And so, me being very short, get to be the one that gets volunteered for that. So I kind of very carefully have to get down into this vehicle and look to figure out what it is that this person's caught on that we're not there. They have been unable to pull him out. And it was just a wild, wild scene. Get him out and then get him loaded and then rode back in the ambulance, which was an experience all on its own. I don't know how people ride in the back of the ambulances and stay upright because I was just shuffling all over the place while we're flying down the road doing 90 miles an hour, and so that's probably the craziest thing I've ever been involved in, to be quite honest. I mean, and there was a lot of meetings after that, a lot of meetings, because I had to call my boss the next day and tell them what happened. And it was a whole, and I get from the perspective of like a risk management thing. I completely understand that. They're like, what if she would have gotten hurt? What if something would have happened to her? Do we have liability when something like that happens? She's not licensed to, to be out in the field, which is actually technically not true. Like my RN scope of practice, and I didn't go out there and do anything outside of my scope by any means, but the hospital was looking at it from a liability standpoint, and I understand that perspective of it, because what if I had been hurt? What if I had gotten out there and something happened to me? And then they had to call my boss to tell him what was going on. So I was just upfront and honest with it. The shift ended. I texted my boss at a reasonable time and said, "Hey, I need you to call me. I need to talk to you about something that happened last night." And he called me and he was like, "I need you to stay at the hospital. I'm going to come in and talk to you." And so I came in and he collectively talked to all of us. I don't necessarily anybody felt like I did anything wrong or anybody did anything wrong. And they understood the necessity of the situation and the direness of the situation. But from a liability perspective and that kind of thing, it was definitely a very big deal. Obviously, I didn't lose my job or anything, but there was definitely some repercussions. And then there was a whole new policy written about it. So I'm the reason for a policy.
If there's not a policy, then it didn't happen, right? Like,
right. And that's what I said. There's not a policy that says that this can't happen. And then they just, and so then a policy got written about it. So
that's really interesting.
They didn't name it after me though. So that's good.
That's rude.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing you were in a small town.
Yeah.
We're going to break this down a little bit. So you were in a small town. The EMS folks called and said, "Hey, we need help." Did the trauma surgeon, I assume it was a trauma surgeon. You were in a small town. It was very likely just the general surgeon that you had.
It was a trauma surgeon. Small town,
perfect.
Comparatively speaking to Albuquerque, yes, but I mean, not that small, but it definitely, yeah, trauma surgeon.
So did he do anything active on the scene? Or did he just kind of go out and hang out? Okay.
Came out and figured it out. All collectively, like kind of put our brains together to figure out what to do, because ideally, I mean, we didn't have a lot of options. What was our other, like we were going to tow this vehicle with somebody in it. That's not really an option at all. Collectively figured out.
But you guys didn't do any like failed amputations or anything like super crazy like that?
That was initially what EMS was kind of requesting. Ended up not having to, which is ideal in that situation, because that's not the ideal place to have to do stuff like that for, risk of infection and stuff like that. But initially that I think was the plan to handle that situation. But we got out there and figured out how to manage it without having to do that, thank God, in the middle of a field, and get dirt and I did feel it was very difficult to call a surgeon at that time of night. It's the middle of the night and he's, half asleep and I'm trying to explain to him what exactly is going on. And he said, "You need me to do what?" And I said, "I just need you to come. That's what I need you to do. I need you to come out to where I am." And he said, "I don't know where that is." I think he was new. And I said, "That's okay. I'm sending a police officer to your house and you're going to follow them." He was like, "What?" He
Yeah.
said, "Okay." He said, "I'll see you out there." And he kind of told me, he's like, "I need you to grab this, this, and this." And so I grabbed that stuff for him and we get out there and fortunately we're able to all step back from the scene and kind of look at it. And all of us put our brains together and say, "Why don't we try this?" And when we tried that, it worked. And then we made it to the hospital
So like I'm
with
so
we looked like a clown car getting out of the hospital because we all literally shoved into the ambulance after this
yeah.
because we were just we got to go right now. And so I think like 9 of us shoved into the back of this ambulance and are just hauling ass down the road to the hospital, pull up, and somebody was waiting on the ambulance deck for us, and they said we looked like a clown car. The doors popped open and all of a sudden people just start piling out of this ambulance, and I had to be helped down because I'm short and couldn't get out of the ambulance on my own. And they're like, it was comical in the midst of just absolute chaos. And so I don't know. That's definitely the craziest thing I've ever been a part of.
That sounds crazy. And so I'm really glad that at that time that you were able to step up and get the opportunity to help the EMS crews that had requested that help. And I'm really sad to hear that you got so much shit from the facility for
Yeah.
stepping out instead of a like, hey, you did good. Like, I
Yeah.
do understand the liability risk, and there are things that can be learned from that event.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's really funny because we see this shit on TV, right? Like, oh, I'm calling the doctor. I need the doctor out here on this EMS scene. And we're in a time now where we are starting to see
Yeah.
doctors riding on vehicles, but it's not a common thing. So
No.
that it kind of hurts my feelings that your team was so opposed and probably would never do it again when EMS was requesting that assistance at that
And
time.
EMS, their their boss actually honestly really went to bat and said, and he kind of shared the same sentiment. He was like, "Nothing did happen to her." He said, "I can assure you that like nobody out on that scene was going to let anything happen to her. Like they understood I was aware of the situation. They'd already called me and let me know." And he kind of shared that same sentiment. And he was like, "More of your nurses should be willing to, hop in like that." And he was like, and just this is what needs to be done. Somebody needs us, and we have to do whatever is possible to try to assist this person. And he said, and I personally feel like, that's what, more people should be willing to do that because I'm sure it was really scary. And it was really scary for me. Like I get out there and I have no idea. I don't go out on the scene. I have, my cush job, quotation marks, in the emergency room where it's more of a controlled environment. And I've always had huge, huge respect for EMS. And it's very important for me. And it's something that I try to really encourage other people to do to form that bond and gap that bridge between EMS and your flight crews and stuff, because we are all on one team, and make friends with them and stuff. And so that's always been something really big for me. And, you know, when we were all talking about it later, they said, "We knew when we called that you would get it taken care of." And that really meant a lot for me to hear because they're important too. And I think that we all sometimes people view themselves as like different entities. Well, that's EMS and these are the ER nurses and this is fire and this is that. But, we're all collectively there for the same thing. And it's very important that we have that bond between all of us. And, it's something that is really in my heart for me to make sure that we all get along. And I definitely don't tolerate down talking on EMS. I have been known to set up ride-alongs for nurses that I have heard griping about why wasn't this done in the field, or oh God, are they dumb? Why would they do this? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, you know what? Well, you get to go do a 4 hour ride along now. I think we're going to set that up and you can see that perspective of things from them so that you can kind of understand that because I think that it is important to understand the perspective from field medicine to medicine that's within a hospital and understanding a more controlled environment. And granted, the ER is not always controlled, and we all know that, but a more controlled environment versus a very uncontrolled environment.
I wish that went both ways, right? I wish there was more cohesion with EMS and with the nursing field, period. And I sometimes forget being in the flight line because my partner is a nurse
Yeah,
and we work well together. So I often forget that that is, I forget that that's how it was in the field. Then
yeah.
I wish that more nurses did ride-alongs, but at the same time, I do also wish that more EMTs, paramedics, firefighters also went and did a rotation in the ER and then progressively up through all the other fields in the hospital as well.
So I have seen more of that, and actually, in West Texas, before I left there, we did have that. They would when they're in paramedic school, and I see it now too where I'm at now. In paramedic school, they do have a rotation or a couple through the emergency room so that they can see the perspective of that. Um, and I think it does make you a more well-rounded provider. I think with and we do ride-alongs. We have our MICN here, and part of getting your MICN certification is doing a ride-along. And I think that it gives you a whole new respect for what the focus is for each thing, for like we each collective specialty, whether it's EMS, whether it's nursing, whether it's flight, whatever it may be. It gives you a better view of what challenges those people face, and while we're all collectively there for that patient, what is it that you see in the field that maybe I'm not seeing, or vice versa? What is it that's challenging you when we're coming into the ER with a patient? Where are the challenges and what can we fix that would make that a smoother transition? And I think it's an important thing to do. And I also argue too that I think it's important in nursing as well that you do through your preceptorship, whether you're doing preceptorship in ER or on the floor or in the OR or whatever, that you are also spending time in rotations in other parts of the hospital so that you do see that, because it's easy for us all to shit on each other. And you hear ER nurses talk about floor nurses never want to take a report, or the floor nurses are like, God, the ER nurses never know what the hell's going on with their patient, kind of thing. But I think when we go play on each other's playgrounds, it really opens up that perspective as to what your roadblocks are to be able to do that. Why is it that the ER nurses don't ever know about their patient's skin from head to toe? And then they come play down in our field and they're like, oh, there's no way I could do a full head to toe skin assessment on somebody. This is chaos,
Yeah, when would you have
I
had
think it's
time?
important to do that. Like, we should all respect and work to understand where our blocks are in our respective fields and our respective specialties so that we have a respect for each other that kind of forms a bond between everybody.
Yeah, no, that and a fantastic answer. Can you tell me what MICN is?
So it's like I cannot remember what the initials stand for right now, but it is basically you can take orders on the radio, or give orders on the radio. It's kind of an extension of ER nursing. It's an extra certification that you go through that's more paramedic focused so that you can give appropriate orders and understand what's going on in the field. So it paints a better picture for you. I I tried to get mine during COVID. It was the craziest thing. I did all my online modules for it, and that's when everything was shut down and we couldn't be around each other. And I had my big MICN class. It was like 8 hours set up for Zoom, but then they canceled my Zoom because of COVID, which was really confusing because I'm
Yeah,
like,
that
isn't
makes
that the
sense.
point of doing this on Zoom? Like, we're not going to get COVID from each other through the interwebs, I promise. But they canceled my class, and then we haven't really had any, because everybody's still trying to collectively mop up the mess from COVID. We're starting those again. I'm supposed to, I think, do mine in August. So it's
So it
kind of an
looks like
extension to that.
mobile intensive care nurse. Does that sound
Yeah,
correct for you? Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
So it kind of opens that up. I think it's a specific maybe to California, certification that you can get. I still can answer the radio. I can't give any orders over the radio like without a doctor. But if you do have that MICN, my understanding is they understand the protocols a little bit better and can guide through protocols. So if I'm answering a radio call, EMS is calling in and they're asking for meds or something, I have to get a doctor to tell me that that's
Yeah.
okay. I can't give that order myself. So
Well, that's pretty cool. It's
yeah,
an interesting step in a different direction.
yeah, yeah. It's a good step though, I think, and I think it's one that needs to happen. Like
Yeah,
it's one. There's a lot of crossover, and I think that there's a lot of room for improvement in that. But I think that we're doing better than we used to be. Um,
for sure.
I think understanding and respecting each other, and it's not, God, EMS is here again, or man, these ER nurses are always so bitchy every time I walk in the door, kind of a thing. And it's not you, I promise. That's what
And
I always tell
EMS
them.
can be just as bad. You know what I mean? I try to shut that shit down when I can. EMS is like, oh, those nurses. And it's like, dude, you don't know how busy they've been. Give them a break. They're not like
Yeah,
this to you every single time. But, at the same time, like this was a conversation I was having with my partner last night when we were training. Even in the flight world, we're treated as EMS, so sometimes you're going to get shit on. Welcome to this side of the barrier. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. I
That's
try
just
to be
how it
nice.
is.
I try to be nice to everybody. And when I teach, like when I have a student or something, that's what I tell them. And it's something that I practice. And I actually had somebody comment on it recently. It is something that I practice, and it is something I try to teach students whenever I'm teaching or if I'm precepting a new nurse. Be kind to everybody,
Yeah.
not just your general nursing and your techs that are in the ER. Say hello to your housekeepers. Speak to them, have conversations with them, ask them how their kids are, phlebotomy, that kind of thing. I say good morning to everybody. I talk to everybody. I try to know, not in like a nosy way, like, oh, what's going on in your life, but kind of like, hey, what's going on? Are you doing okay in life? And then circling back and asking people about those things. Hey, the last time we talked, you had this going on. Like, has that gotten better? Do you need anything, kind of a thing? And it's noticed. I try to learn everybody's names so that I'm calling people's by names and not, hey, you, because that's
Yeah.
rude.
No, that's
And
fantastic.
so we have to look outside of our own perspective and like outside of our own little bubbles and get to know each other on a personal level, because this job is hard and it sucks, and it doesn't just suck for the nurses, it doesn't just suck for EMS. We have other people that are in emergency medicine, especially within a hospital, that are seeing things that maybe they're not used to, and maybe it's not something that they thought they were going to be signing up for, like your EVS worker that is there to do housekeeping tasks didn't sign up to suddenly have to have a front row view of some horrific trauma that's going on. Make sure that those people are okay too. You
Yeah.
walk out of one of those rooms, and instead of just hugging your nurses and your doctor and your techs or whoever, hey, are you okay? Like, I noticed you outside the room. Are you okay? That was a lot to witness. And a lot of times you'll find out people aren't okay, and you got to circle those people too. They're important as well. Everybody's important in our jobs, and none of us could do our jobs without the other people.
I agree 100%. And speaking of asking if people are okay, like I've gotten to see you really flourish in the last few years to become this person who you are now. You've done a lot. I've seen some weight loss with you. You generally just look happy. I can tell, a lot of the time in your posts that you're talking about self care and taking care of you and your family. So, what has changed for you?
So, oh man, I moved to California 5 years ago, and a lot happened. I ended up divorced, which wasn't ideally, what anybody wants to happen. That's nobody gets married to get divorced, kind of a thing. But it really, honestly, made me take a step back and collectively look at my life. And I was a very unhappy person. I had dealt with a ton of trauma, through work, through life, through everything, that I just didn't ever unpack. I just kept shoving. I told my therapist, I said, it's like you have these boxes in your brain and you shove stuff in boxes and then you kick it to the back of your brain and then you don't ever deal with it again until it pops out and that box like falls off the shelf and suddenly now you have to deal with it. So my divorce really prompted me to kind of start taking those boxes off the shelf and start unpacking them. What's in these? Like what situations have I been in, and what has happened in my life that has collectively shaped me into the person that I am? Because I was unhappy, and just not a cheerful person, was very crass towards people, wasn't nice to myself, wasn't nice to the people around me very much. And sit down with all of that and really just take a look at it and what in my life is making me feel this way. And I mean, it was hard. And you said something when we first started talking, that it's not all fucking rainbow and sunshine, and it is not. I tell people all the time, what you see on the outside and where I am now is by no means the finished product of healing, but it's definitely a healing journey. But it has not just been, I talk about a lot like on social media, that you see all these posts about healing and stuff, and it's like, oh, go out and do some yoga and have a nice latte and maybe journal a little bit and your life will be better. It's a lot of days crying on the floor and really having to introspectively look at yourself. And I picked myself apart and looked at the parts of myself that I truly liked about myself, and then looked at the parts about myself that I didn't like about myself, and sat down and decided which one of those could be changed and what can I do to actually make those changes. And I tell you, it's the best thing I've ever done for myself. It's been rough. Uh, there's a lot of stuff work related. There's a lot of stuff friendship related. Obviously, there was a lot of stuff marriage related. Divorce isn't easy on anybody that I had to look at. And it prompted it. And being overweight was a big one for me. It was a huge obstacle for me. I was pretty heavy at my heaviest, and I wanted to be able to go do all these things. I live in this beautiful place where hiking is very abundant, water activities are very abundant, and I did not have the stamina to be able to do those things because of my weight. And so I really started making positive changes, and I had to look at my relationship with food a lot with that. I was a stress eater for sure, and I had stress eaten my way into pre-diabetes and pre-hypertension, and was on the road to having a very unhealthy later in life, and decided that's not what I wanted for myself, honestly. We see patients all the time who have not taken care of themselves. And I just one day said, I don't want to be that person that's ridden in my chair when I'm 70, 80 years old, can't get up, can't move, has diabetes, wounds, all this kind of thing. So I made a lot of changes. I cleaned up my diet. I cleaned up my exercise habits. I cleaned up my brain. My brain was the hardest thing to clean up.
And
It was a mess.
what assistance did you get in that?
I did a lot of therapy. I did a lot of therapy. And I did a lot of journaling through that. And the journaling really, and therapy, everybody should have a therapist. And the people that say that they don't need a therapist, get a therapist. Like, there's things in your brain that maybe you're not realizing that you need to unpack, that you absolutely need to unpack. Life is not sunshine and rainbows for everybody. I think it's really easy in the world of, now of social media, that we look at other people's lives because people are posting the nice clips of their life. And it's easy to look at other people's lives and think, why do they have it so easy? They have such a beautiful life. Look at their beautiful family. But there's no such thing as perfect. And being able to step back from that and realize, hey, there's things I need to work on within myself to make myself happier. And then also realizing there's things that you need to work on within yourself, because maybe the people around you that you interact with the most are not treating you the best, and realizing that maybe you're part of that problem. Maybe I'm the one that's inviting this in with my attitude and my behavior. And maybe if I start tweaking some things, I'll notice some changes. And I absolutely have noticed a lot of changes. I have phenomenal friends now. I have a great friend circle. We're just one big happy family, and we are such an open group of people that we talk about everything and anything. I mean, we've gone out to the lake and been floating around in inner tubes talking about families and divorce and parents and all kinds of things, and laying in the middle of the lake crying, and just all collectively having a great talk. My friends definitely held me up through a lot of it, because there was a lot of times I just wanted to lay down and give up, just I don't want to do this anymore. This is hard. And my friends really made a big difference, and my kids. And I've seen a lot of positive changes with my kids since I've made the changes that I've made too. So, and they got to watch their mom instead of, giving up and just being angry at the world and being mad at her circumstances, they got to see their mom pick herself up off the ground and make a lot of really big changes and be a happier person. And so I think that that right there, I hope that's something my kids carry on for the rest of their life, that, hey, that's possible for you. And I hope that other people that have known me for a really long time and saw me in those dark places and saw me when I was at my most depressed and saddest and just teeter tottering on the edge, see that I worked really hard to pull myself out of that hole. And that if they're ever in that same place where it's just dark and desolate and you just want to lay down and just give up because you just can't handle it anymore, that it is possible. Like you can absolutely pick yourself up. It's hard. It, it's not pretty by any means, but you can do it. And, by whatever means necessary, maybe therapy isn't for you. Maybe finding a really good hobby or something healthy for you to do to unwind your brain is what you need to do. But just do it for yourself. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any truer reflection than seeing the changes in the people around you, right? When
Hmm.
you're doing these things and you're getting to see that positive reflection from, in your example, from your kids. And that's phenomenal. That is absolutely phenomenal. Do you feel comfortable talking about like some of the trauma that you had from work?
Yeah, absolutely. We can. Um, hmm. Yeah, you sent me, all this stuff to kind of go over through the thing. And one thing that I realized through that, and for anybody listening, I'm going to implore you to, you don't have to write it in every day. Maybe you do it once a week. Maybe you do it once a month. Sit down and write out your victories too. Write out the good things that happen because it's really easy in emergency medicine to collect the trauma because it was really easy to sit back and think about the really horrible things that I've seen, and we could sit here in 14 years. There's suitcases on suitcases to unpack of horrible shit that I've seen at work that our brains are not wired to have to see. But when I sat down with the question was like, what's the funniest patient or like what's the happiest story? I had to really think about those and really had to dig for those. So I think that like one thing that I would tell people is start writing down those victories. When you have that one patient that made a really big difference, maybe it was the way they acted, maybe you caught something with them and ended up saving their life, maybe you said something to them that made a really big difference. Write those down so that you can go back to those on those hard days when you're really questioning why it is that you chose the profession you did because it's hard. And we have front row seats to the worst days of people's lives, and it wears on our souls for sure. I had a God, I guess it's been 10 years now, maybe a little bit longer, 11 something, somewhere in there. Had a collection of just horrific shit that happened. We had a lot of cohesiveness back in Texas with our hospital between the ER and EMS. A lot of us had gone to school together. We had known each other for years, that kind of a thing. West Texas town kind of feel, and we had one of our firefighters that got murdered, who was really close to all of us and was murdered. And it really sent a shockwave through all of us. And then, not even 6 months later, one of our sheriff's officers was shot on duty. And it was collectively really, and both of those guys were stand up people that I still talk about very fondly of all these years later. And then at the same time, a really good friend of mine that was one of the firefighters found out he had cancer and passed away. So within a year and a half, it was like three people that all of us knew and loved, were gone from this earth. Um, and that had really worn on me. And I don't think that I realized how much that was affecting me personally, from a mental standpoint. The catalyst for really a lot of, and why I stepped away from ER full time for a while and did float pool. And I still did ER at that time, but doing float pool gave me enough of a like long handled spoon that I didn't have to do it all the time. And it wasn't all the only thing that I was doing. We had this pediatric trauma. They were around the same age as one of my kids at the time. And it was a really horribly tragic accident that had a really terrible end to it. There was there was nothing good that came out of that. And the fallout from that and watching the families. And I mean, there was a lot of tension between the two families. It wasn't a good situation by any means. Even even if these had all been the best family in the entire world, picture perfect, white picket fence, it wasn't going to be a good situation for anybody. There was a lot of heart, but the families themselves, there was a lot of tension between those families. So when we had to call the trauma, um, I mean, it was a full on riot situation that we had going on. Ended up having to call the police, which was a very, very difficult decision for me because these are people that are in a kind of pain that nobody should ever have to face. Nobody should ever have to face losing a child. I know that it happens. We all know that it happens. It's part of our job. We've all been part of the PD codes and stuff like that. But having to try to get control back of the department in the midst of this, with all of this going on, and having to get the police involved was a really difficult decision. And I think that really fed on me, because I felt guilty for that. I felt guilty that I had to call the police during what is these people's worst day of their lives. Um, and I think that really was a catalyst for me. It was my breaking point. We'd had all this death with our coworkers, and then this happened, and it truly affected who I was as a human being. I could not get out of bed after that. I kept replaying things of that night in my brain over and over and over again. I felt so much immense guilt about the entire situation as a whole, but also having to get law enforcement because now I am part of these people's. I felt like these people probably view me as the worst person in the entire world. We're dealing with this horrible thing, and this person called the police on us. And I really hoped stepping back that they found forgiveness in their hearts for that, because the backlash that I received from having to do that was not good. I mean, they were very angry about that, and I understand it from their perspective, but also from my perspective, it was a necessity, and I harbored a lot of guilt for that, making their day that much worse. And that trauma as a whole just was really, really horrible and really unfortunate. And I think it really collectively pushed me over the edge that they were the same age as my kid. I remember after that, like, calmed down. I went outside and just sat down on the curb, and one of my friends followed me out, and I said, I can't go back in there. I can't do this anymore. And I remember him telling me, hey, listen, you don't have a choice right now. If you need to take time off after this, that's one thing, but right now I need you to go back in there. And I did, and things just collectively got worse for me, and worse and worse and worse. Wasn't getting out of bed, wasn't taking care of myself at all. When you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of the people around you. I just checked out after that, and my heart wasn't in emergency medicine. I was having flashbacks to that pretty frequently, and took a lot to get over that. That was one of the boxes in the back of my brain when I started unpacking that I really had to work to get through that box because it was one of the hardest ones I've ever been a part of. And that one still comes out to play every once in a while, honestly. There's something will happen, I'll hear a sound or I'll smell something, or just something. And the images from that particular situation will just pop back up. And I've gotten better about dealing with those triggers and knowing how to kind of quell them, I guess, so to speak, and kind of get them to calm down. But I've also gotten really good about recognizing that, hey, I probably, while right now may not be the best time to work through this, I probably do need to go and look at that and examine it a little bit. Like, why is that coming out right now? And that's helped a lot, Um, but that's definitely one of the worst things that I've ever been a part of. And all these years later, it still is very much forefront in my mind.
Well, I'm not a therapist, but I want to tell you to stop feeling guilty. I mean, it really shows how big of a heart that you have and how empathetic you are to the people that you take care of because you were literally afraid for your safety and your team's safety and still felt guilty about calling the cops. And I don't know what happened in the situation, but sometimes we have to be the person that those families are going to be angry at to get them through this stage, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to be that fucking Batman for people.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And that is something that I've come, and not even just from that situation. And that's what I will tell anybody stepping into anywhere in medicine, is that sometimes you're going to be the bad guy, and sometimes you are just going to have to take that hit, because sometimes people need to be angry at a situation, and you are the easiest person to be angry with, and it is not personal, and it is something that they will have to work through later in life. As long as you know that you did everything that you could, that you advocated in the proper way, that you did what you needed to for the family, for the patient, for whomstever, and kept yourself safe, that sometimes we just have to be the person that they get to be angry at. And sometimes that's okay, because life is hard and it is really unfair sometimes. And sometimes we get a lot of misplaced anger and hate, and it just is what it is sometimes for us.
Yeah, it is what it is. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I'm so blessed that people come on and share these stories with me, and it's to allow people to understand, that they're not the only ones going through it. But while, because earlier you said that you had a really hard time kind of figuring out your happiest patient. Were you able to figure one out?
I actually did. I figured out two, and they're my favorite stories in the world. We delivered a baby once, and the whole situation was wild. Anytime you're delivering a kid in the emergency room, it's not a good situation. Like,
No.
that's a good way to make everybody in the ER just all of a sudden get on it. Just tell us that there's a baby coming and it's coming right now. The baby wasn't doing well when initially was born at all. Um, Ended up needing, resuscitation, all kinds of stuff. And obviously, that's not really our forte in the emergency room. Thank God for our nursery nurses coming
Yeah.
down when they did, because it was chaos. But I mean, I was right there, and I helped resuscitate the baby, helped deliver all this kind of stuff. And at the time, we shipped our NICU babies away, so there wasn't really any follow up or anything like that. I did call and check, and I was like, "Hey, I know, like, it's not." I was like, she's like, "No, it's kind of a professional courtesy." And she was like, "Baby's doing better, blah blah blah." Kind of talked to me a little bit, which did feel better. Years later, probably 4 or 5 years later, I ended up running into the parents, and she stopped me. And she said, "You saved my child's life." And I looked at her and I said, "You are going to have to be more specific." And I said, "I'm not trying to be cocky when I say that, but I've been doing ER for a long time. So, what do you mean by that?" And she told me. She told me the story about her delivery. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And I said, "I do remember you." I said, "You actually, like, I actually think about y'all really often." She pulled her phone out and showed me pictures of their child who was thriving. And it was honestly like just the best, most healing thing, because it was one of those things, a lot of times in emergency medicine, we have no idea what happens after that. Like, we stabilize them and then it's like, "Oh, I wonder what happened to that person." And we don't have really means to find out about that at all. So it's always a big question mark over our brain. So that was a very, very healing thing to have happen. My other happy story, and I do love to tell this one. And so this one didn't take too much digging to dig out, but it's one of the, sometimes we feel like we don't make that big of a difference in people's lives because maybe it's not that evident. But this situation just really came full circle for me. We had an overdose. Person was found down, resuscitated them. And through that, I sat with them after the resuscitation, and talked to them and was very honest with them. When I was younger, my dad passed away when I was 15, and I didn't deal with that pain at all. And I ended up partying a whole bunch whenever I was younger. It's something I'm actually very open about. And tell people I ended up in situations that I should have never been in. I put myself there, but I also understand the other side of addiction and partying and how quickly it can happen and how slippery of a slope it is. So I sat with this patient after the resuscitation, talked to them for a very, very long time about life choices and being young and thinking that we're being cool because we're hanging out with a cool group. and what those life choices can lead to, and talk to them and, just felt them out. What do you want to do with your life? Have you ever thought about that? You're pretty young, maybe you haven't, but have you ever thought about that? And they said, I've always been really interested in medicine, da 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 da. Sat there and talked to them about like making better choices about friends and like, hey, you call people your friends, but where are they at right now? I don't see any of them here making sure you're okay. I do see your family here, and had a very long talk with this person. And about 2 or 3 years later, I get called to the front of the hospital, and I didn't remember this person's face at all. And so when I walked out, somebody said, this person wants to talk to you. And I'm looking at this person. I'm like, oh, I don't know this person. And naturally thinking, I'm like, oh God, like what is happening? I probably pissed this person off or something.
Somebody's here to kill me. Yeah.
They brought me in their acceptance letter to nursing school and told me that because of that night and because of the things that I sat and talked to them and because of my honesty with them, that they really made a lot of really positive life choices and decided to go to college, and that they had just been accepted to nursing school. And they said, I hope that someday I can make the difference in somebody's life that you made for me. And when I tell you, sobbed and cried in the middle of an emergency room lobby and hugged this person, that's an understatement. Just, I was so happy to get that full circle back for me and get to see a positive impact that I did make on somebody. And so, and I hope that they're doing well. If you happen to be listening to this, I think about you really often. If that story struck a nerve with you, and that, I think about you a lot. And I'm so glad that something I said landed in the right place for you.
That's so fucking cool, dude. That's so cool. I love stories like that because you just don't hear them very often. So it's good to hear those positive reflections.
Yeah, we have lots of people that come back and they're like, oh, you were here the night such and such, and you're a bitch, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, I
Yes.
don't remember you. You're going to have to be more specific. So when we do get those little glimpses, the universe sends them to us. You got to hold on to those,
Yes.
definitely for sure.
And I love the way that's when the universe brings them to us. It's so fucking true, dude.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
true. All right, Tammy. Well, I want to give you the opportunity to either plug somebody or plug something or talk about anything that you feel that we didn't talk about.
I think the one thing I want to really talk about is like, if you're considering stepping into medicine of any capacity, whether it's EMS, whether it's paramedic, whether it's fire, like whatever avenue, law enforcement, of first responders or emergency medicine or medicine in general, is to learn how to watch your mental health. Learn your signs and symptoms of things not going well, learning your signs and symptoms of burnout, because burnout doesn't look the same for all of us. Burnout is not, we always think it's a crash and burn, and suddenly we, like a car crash, you're driving along and everything's fine, and then suddenly it's not. It can be really slow, and it can creep up on you, and it can definitely affect you. And to find the appropriate people to talk to, find a therapist, and find a therapist that is specifically for first responders and nursing and stuff like that. Because I cannot tell you, I've gone through therapists that I've tried to talk to through my job, like about my job, and they're like, well, why don't you just quit? Well, I guess if it was that easy, that's what I would have done, right? I love what I do, but what I do is also traumatizing, and our jobs can be traumatizing, and you need to be able to recognize that and work through that in some healthy capacity and not turn into a shell of a person, because once you become that person, you just stop caring. And that's not what any of us need to do. We need to show up, and we need to show up with our best for the people that we take care of and that we have the privilege of caring for, regardless of how we're looking at it. Because I think a lot of times we get in there and it's almost mechanical for us, but we do have the capacity to make a huge difference in people's lives with the things we say and the things we do. And sometimes you might just be the person that makes a change for them, and, says the right thing at the right time, and it sticks to them, and they decide to start making those positive changes for themselves too. So I think that that's my biggest thing that I hope people take away, is just to take care of yourself so that you can take care of other people and that you're showing up with your best.
Yes, and that is something I have preached multiple times on this show.
I know. Sam, I absolutely love what you're doing. And I love that you are shedding a light on something that I think a lot of us for years, especially those of us who have been doing this for a really long time. I think now there's much more focus on mental health, but I think a lot of us can remember the time where you sucked it up and you dealt with it.
Yep.
Like, this is what you signed up for, kind of an attitude. And I think that that's led to a lot of hurt and a lot of harm within the emergency medicine community and medicine as a whole. It's led to a lot of suicides and a lot of things that didn't need to happen if there was just an outlet for that. And I cannot express to you how happy it is in my heart that you have created this outlet and this light to shine on this, and a place for people to be able to share these stories and recognize that in each other.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that so much. And Tami, I know you were a little nervous coming on today, but you fucking killed it, dude. Thank you so much for coming on today and for sharing all of these amazing stories. And I cannot tell you how fucking proud of you I am.
Thank you so much. That means so much.
I've gotten to watch you transition into the person that you are today. And I know you said you're not through the final piece, but you should be proud, even if you stopped today. Okay.
Thank you so much. That means so much.
I love you, friend. You are amazing.
I love you too. Thank you.
Yep. I hope you have a good day, honey.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show and want to show your support, be sure to check out the new merch store on Bonfire. Find the link in the description below. Also, if you have any guest suggestions or if you're interested in being a guest on Noon yourself, visit the website at www.samspursuit.com to get in touch.